A mechanic thought he was just fixing a van, but fate had other plans. A single mom, a little girl's innocent words, and a chance encounter that changed everything. Don't miss this heart-touching story. Like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Let's get started. In a small Texas town where everyone knew each other's names, Ethan had spent another long day fixing cars in his modest garage. The summer air was heavy with dust and heat as he rolled down the shutter, ready to walk home to his little trailer on the edge of town. But before he could, his sharp ears caught the sound of a struggling engine sputtering and dying out near the roadside. Turning his head, he spotted an old minivan parked crookedly, hood up, and a woman inside looking worried. Ethan sighed softly. He knew that look. Trouble had found someone again. The woman, Emily, stepped out with her daughter Lily, clutching her hand. Emily was around 31, her clothes simple but neat, her face carrying both tiredness and dignity. "Hi," she said hesitantly, her voice low as if embarrassed. I just moved here for work, but the van gave out on me. I don't have anyone to call, and honestly, I can't afford a tow." Her words carried the weight of someone who had been carrying burdens too long. Ethan's heart softened instantly. He wasn't a man who liked to see anyone stranded. Ethan, 34 and a single dad himself, looked at the little girl hiding behind her mother's arm, peeking with curious, bright eyes. He gave a reassuring smile and said warmly, "Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it." He pushed the van slowly toward his garage, his muscles straining, but his determination stronger. Emily stood by nervously, watching a stranger help her without hesitation. Lily, however, looked delighted by the whole scene, almost as if she sensed something good was happening, even though her mother seemed afraid to hope. Inside the garage, the smell of oil and iron lingered as Ethan pulled his tools from a battered red toolbox. Emily sat quietly by the door, still uneasy, while Lily began exploring with wide-eyed wonder. She touched the edges of tires stacked in the corner, stared at the hanging wrenches and whispered, "Wow," as if the mechanic's world was some kind of magical kingdom. Ethan chuckled, glancing at her, and asked, "You like cars?" Lily nodded, her pigtails bouncing, and replied, "They're noisy but fun." That small moment of innocent joy brought a spark of warmth into the otherwise heavy evening. Ethan bent over the van, his hands moving swiftly, checking belts and wires with practiced ease. Emily leaned forward, watching nervously as if expecting him to say something terrible. "It's nothing too bad," Ethan finally said, wiping his hands on a rag. "Just a loose connection. I'll get you running again." Emily exhaled in relief, as though she had been holding her breath since the moment her car died. Lily clapped her hands softly, cheering, "Yay! We can go home, Mommy." That sound of a child's hopefulness made Ethan smile. It reminded him of his own son, who stayed with his grandmother tonight. The repair didn't take long. Ethan tightened bolts, replaced a worn wire, and within minutes the engine roared back to life. The garage echoed with the sound of victory. Emily's eyes widened as if she couldn't believe the problem had been solved so quickly. She walked closer, her gratitude written plainly across her face. "How much do I owe you?" she asked quietly, bracing herself for an answer she likely couldn't afford. Her hands fumbled in her small purse, where only a few wrinkled bills rested, barely enough to cover gas for the week. Ethan shook his head and leaned against the car casually, his rag still in hand. "It's on the house," he said simply. "Just glad you and your little girl are safe." Emily froze, stunned. She had been prepared for a burden, not a blessing. For a moment she couldn't speak. Her eyes glistened as though she was about to cry, but she fought it back. I don't know what to say," she whispered. Lily, however, skipped around in delight, clearly not burdened by the same weight her mother carried, just happy to see her mom smiling even for a second. Ethan gave a half smile and shrugged. No need to say anything. "This town's small. We all look out for each other here." His words carried sincerity, the kind of honesty that was hard to find in bigger places. Emily stood there quietly, her heart heavy with gratitude she couldn't put into words. For years she had faced struggle after struggle, often alone. Now a stranger had not only helped but refused payment. She realized that maybe, just maybe, moving to this little Texas town wasn't a mistake after all. Kindness still lived here, and she had stumbled right into it. When Ethan finally closed his shop for the night, the three of them stood outside in the fading orange glow of sunset. Emily looked at him as if memorizing his face, the man who had helped her when she felt most helpless. "Thank you," she said again, her voice stronger this time, her eyes meeting his directly. Ethan nodded, watching Lily climb into the van with her small backpack. As the old minivan rolled down the quiet street, Ethan felt an odd sense of peace. He didn't know it yet, but this meeting was only the beginning of something life-changing for all of them. While Ethan washed his hands at the gas station sink, he felt the grime of the car engine slide away, but the warmth of the little girl's laughter lingered. Lily stood nearby, swinging her small backpack, her eyes full of admiration. She tugged at his sleeve and whispered shyly, "You're really nice. Mommy doesn't smile often, but she's smiling now." Ethan froze for a moment, his chest tightening. He turned his gaze toward Emily, who sat in the driver's seat, brushing her loose hair back. Nervously, for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something stirring, something more than loneliness. Emily was fiddling with the keys, trying to start the van, but Ethan could see her hands trembling just a little. She wasn't used to kindness. He could sense it. That small smile on her lips was hesitant, like it hadn't been used in years. Ethan caught her eyes through the windshield, and for a second they both just stared, an unspoken acknowledgement passing between them. Then, flustered, Emily turned away, adjusting the mirrors though they were already fine. Ethan looked down at Lily, who was now staring up at him with hopeful eyes. "Mommy doesn't smile often," Lily repeated softly, her words carrying the weight of a secret. Then she leaned closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's my mum. Please marry her. We need someone like you." Ethan's heart stumbled. He crouched down, bringing himself eye level with the little girl. She smelled faintly of crayons and bubble gum, innocent and fragile. "That's a big wish, sweetheart," he said gently, his voice breaking with unexpected emotion. He wasn't sure if it was the child's words or the raw honesty in her gaze, but it shook him deeply. Emily overheard Lily's tiny voice and felt her stomach twist. Her face flushed red instantly. "Lily!" she whispered sharply, rushing to pull her daughter back. Her hands were clumsy as she buckled Lily into her seatbelt, avoiding Ethan's eyes entirely. "I'm sorry about that," she muttered, her voice trembling with embarrassment. She says things sometimes." Ethan wanted to reply, to tell Emily that her daughter's words weren't silly, but brave. But instead he just nodded, sensing she was overwhelmed. He didn't want to push, not when she already seemed so guarded, so used to carrying burdens alone. The van's old engine roared reluctantly to life, thanks to the repairs Ethan had made. Emily gripped the wheel tightly, her knuckles pale. "Thank you again," she said through the open window, her tone polite but distant. Lily, however, waved enthusiastically, her small hand reaching out as though she didn't want to let Ethan go. "Bye, Ethan! Don't forget what I said," she called, her voice clear in the night air. Ethan managed a small smile, raising his grease-stained hand in a wave, but inside he was shaken. He watched the van drive away until its taillights disappeared into the dark highway. Standing alone under the dim lights of the gas station, Ethan felt the silence press down around him. The night should have ended there, but it didn't feel finished. He couldn't stop replaying Lily's words in his head. "Please marry her. We need someone like you." It was such an innocent plea, yet it cut straight through his defenses. He thought of his own daughter, who he hadn't seen in years after the painful divorce. She would have been close to Lily's age now. Maybe that was why the child's voice reached so deeply into him. Cracking open wounds he thought had scarred over, Ethan slid into his own old pickup, but for the first time in months, he didn't feel like driving home. His small apartment, empty and quiet, suddenly felt unbearable. He sat there gripping the steering wheel, staring at the road ahead, where Emily's van had disappeared. Who were they? This tired woman and her bright-eyed daughter. Something about them pulled at him like a magnet. He wondered if Emily's husband had left her, or if she had been carrying everything alone for years. The exhaustion on her face had told him stories she didn't speak aloud. Meanwhile, Emily's heart raced as she drove through the quiet streets. She could still feel Ethan's gaze, the warmth of his presence, the way he spoke to Lily so gently. It had been a long time since anyone treated them with kindness without expecting anything in return. She glanced at Lily in the rearview mirror, who was humming happily, as though the evening had been some grand adventure. "You can't say things like that to strangers, Lily," Emily whispered, her voice breaking a little. But Lily just grinned sleepily and said, "He's not a stranger, Mommy. He's the one." Emily gripped the steering wheel tighter, blinking away sudden tears. She had built walls around her heart for years, protecting herself and her daughter from disappointment and heartbreak. And yet, in one short evening, Ethan had slipped past those walls without even trying. His kindness, his quiet strength, the way he had looked at her. It scared her. She didn't want to hope for something that might never be real. But Lily's words lingered, echoing in her mind. "Please marry her. We need someone like you." Emily shook her head, whispering to herself, "It's just a mechanic. We'll never see him again." But destiny had its own plans. A week had passed since that unforgettable day when Ethan fixed Emily's old van for free. The garage had been quieter than usual, though Ethan found his mind often wandering back to the little girl's whisper and Emily's soft smile. So when Emily's van pulled up again, Ethan instinctively thought something had gone wrong. But this time, the engine sounded perfectly fine. Emily stepped out, brushing her hair back nervously, while Lily darted forward and grabbed Ethan's hand. "Mom, I told you he's the one," she said boldly, her little voice filled with conviction. Ethan couldn't help but chuckle. Emily's cheeks flushed as she tugged at her jacket. "I'm sorry," she laughed nervously. "Lily's been insisting we come back here, not because of the van, but because she likes talking to you." Ethan smiled, crouching to Lily's level. "Well, I like talking to her too," he said gently, tapping her nose. Lily beamed, clearly thrilled with her own matchmaking attempt. Emily, still embarrassed, suggested they grab coffee since it was a slow afternoon. Ethan agreed, and together, the three of them crossed the street to the small diner, a place he hadn't visited in months. The diner smelled of fresh pie and strong coffee, and the warm booths invited them in from the chilly afternoon air. Ethan slid into the seat opposite Emily, while Lily eagerly sat beside him, as if she'd known him forever. Emily stirred her coffee quietly before breaking the silence. "I've been raising Lily on my own for 6 years. Her father, well, he left before she was born. It hasn't been easy." Ethan listened intently, seeing not just the tired lines on her face, but the strength behind them. There was resilience in her voice that mirrored something deep inside him. When it was his turn to share, Ethan cleared his throat and admitted, "I was a single dad too. My boy Mason is 12 now, but when things got tough and I couldn't make ends meet, my sister stepped in to help raise him. He still visits, but—" His voice cracked slightly, and he took a breath. "I've carried guilt ever since." Emily's eyes softened, and without hesitation she reached across the table to squeeze his hand. "You did what you had to do for him," she said firmly. "That doesn't make you less of a father, it makes you stronger." Lily watched them with wide eyes, resting her chin in her palms. She wasn't fidgety like most kids her age. Instead, she seemed to soak in every word. "See?" she whispered, though loud enough for them to hear. "You both understand. That means you belong together." Her innocence brought a laugh to the table, but also a lingering silence afterward. Emily shook her head, smiling at her daughter. "She has this wild imagination," she said softly, though her eyes betrayed a spark of hope she tried to hide. Ethan simply smiled, appreciating the truth Lily had spoken. They talked for hours, their coffee cups long empty and the sun setting through the diner's windows. They shared stories of hard nights, lonely mornings, and small victories that kept them going. Ethan found himself laughing more than he had in years, and Emily admitted she couldn't remember the last time someone truly listened to her without judgment. Lily eventually dozed off against Ethan's side, her head on his arm, as if she had always belonged there. For Ethan, it felt like life had just given him a second chance he never expected. When it was finally time to leave, Ethan carried Lily to the van while Emily walked beside him. The moment felt strangely natural, as though they had done it many times before. After settling Lily into the seat, Emily lingered, her hands brushing against his as she adjusted her daughter's blanket. Their eyes met, and for a second, words weren't necessary. "Thank you, Ethan," Emily whispered, "not just for fixing the van, but for listening today." Ethan nodded, his voice low. "Sometimes the right people come into our lives when we least expect it." As the van's engine rumbled to life, Emily rolled down the window. "Maybe we could do this again," she said hesitantly. Ethan's lips curved into a smile. "I'd like that," he replied. Lily stirred awake just in time to wave at him, murmuring sleepily, "See? I told you, Mom." Emily laughed, shaking her head, but there was a glow in her eyes now, a softness that hadn't been there before. With one last glance, she pulled away from the curb, leaving Ethan standing there in the fading light, with his heart unexpectedly lighter. That night, Ethan sat alone in his small apartment, but he didn't feel the same loneliness that usually haunted him. He replayed the laughter, the conversations, the way Lily's tiny hand had fit so easily into his own. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought he had lost, a sense of belonging, of family. He realized that what he had fixed for Emily wasn't just a van. In helping her, and in listening to Lily's innocent truth, he had stumbled into something far more valuable. He had found a piece of his heart he didn't know was missing. The following days carried a quiet anticipation. Ethan found himself checking the clock at work, hoping he'd see that old van pull into the lot again. For once, his job wasn't just about engines and tools. It felt like fate had rolled into his garage and left him with a gift he never expected. Emily and Lily had walked into his life needing help, but in truth, they had given him something greater, a reason to hope, to smile, and to believe again. And as he closed the shop one evening, Ethan whispered to himself, "Sometimes miracles come with grease-stained hands."